Can you log in into
Hello?
we'll just wait a couple more minutes until more people join.
Hi, everyone. We're going to get started now. So can everyone hear me okay?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I actually have compiler 0 on my Mac, and I was not really sure how to run it. So if you could tell us the commands, that would be great.
So you're trying to run on Sublime from the terminal? Is that what you're asking?
Could you repeat your question?
So what I was saying before was I had a similar compiler to what Caitlin is showing, and I wanted to know the exact commands that you needed to run on the compiler.
Yeah, so just to go over some bash commands, you want to go into, so usually when you open up terminal, it'll go to something like this, and then you want to go cd into your directory. So in this case, my file is saved on the desktop. So I'm going to go cd desktop, and then I'm going to type out python3 class3.py because that's my file name saved onto my desktop. And then that should run whatever is in the file.
Excuse me. Is there any steps before that, or is that what usually shows up when you're starting?
Wait, sorry, what were you saying?
So you need to type in any commands to get to the point where you were when you first started.
Yeah, you need to type out like cd into your directory that your file is saved at.
You could
and then
So I think this is a question more about like your setup. So we're trying to get the class started right now. So we can answer your question after class in more depth.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah.
A very quick question. The compilation code for this is runtime and it's Python 3 and then the file name .py, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, cool. So if everyone can see this. Let's zoom in a bit. And so last week we went over some of the variables that we can define in Python. This includes like things like integers, like x equals 1, strings such as like s equals, this is a string. And then we also looked into how to splice up these strings. For example, like new string can be s equals index here, this, and that should give you string. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna print this out. Yeah, and so that gives you a splice version of s. And then we also learned that we can like concatenate that with other strings. And then you can do something like s plus equals another string. And then you can print s, and that should allow you to add two strings together. So we're gonna build off this a little bit this week. First off, we're gonna go over some conditionals, something that we kind of went over in the Java class yesterday. So I'm gonna ask, oh, we also learned inputs last week. So I'm going to redefine x. Oh. Okay, sorry. X equals input. Please enter an integer. And then actually, so every time you do input, it's gonna return a string. So you wanna actually be able to cast it to an integer in order to like actually use it as an integer in Python. Otherwise, some of these conditionals won't work the same. So now that x is an integer in Python, we want to be able to test to see what our integer actually means, or like what value it is. And so if we do an if statement, it asks the computer, or like Python, if x is less than 0, and then we can print something like value is less than 0. And these conditionals just ask the compiler like, what is the value of x, and is that value less than 0? And then there's other commands such as, and then we also use the command as like else if in Java is changed to elif in Python. And then we can use other conditionals such as this, and this equals just compares it to 0. And so that means if x is equal to 0, then it will be true, and it will run this statement inside after the colon. And if it's false, then it won't run the statement inside the colon. So yeah, then I'm just gonna do x is 0. Yeah, so I'm just gonna try this out first. And so it says, please enter an integer. And first off, I'm gonna do like -1. And then it says the value is less than 0. And then please enter integer again. I'm gonna do 0 this time, and then x is 0. So does everyone kind of understand where I'm going with this? Okay, cool.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yes.
So why is it necessary to have the x equals int and then the input before you put please enter an integer?
So actually, every time you have like an input, I think even in Java, but in Python, when you ask the compiler on the console, like, please enter an integer, so whatever you put into this is going to be actually returned as a string. And so this is going to be a string after you type it out and press enter in the compiler, in the console. And then if we want to use it as an integer, then we actually want to cast it back to an integer. Otherwise, it's going to treat it as a string. So then if it was a string, then you could do things like these commands on it, like the splicing commands, because a string actually is technically an array of like letters.
What is
but if
the bracket? Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. So, and if you want to use it as an integer, you want to cast it as an integer, so you can do things like x plus equals 2 or something like that.
So if you do x plus equals 2, it'll basically say that please enter an integer, and then 2 will be the integer entered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if it'll just add 2 to whatever you entered as an integer. So if in this case I did like -2, then the answer should be like 0, right? So then x is 0.
And then it would refer to the else statement, correct?
Yeah, it'll go to
Alright.
this statement. And something we want to know in Python is that these indentations are really important, because we don't have the brackets you'll see in Java. And so these indentations actually show what's inside this if statement. So if we do something like this, I'm pretty sure it'll throw some kind of error. Yeah, indentation error, because this if statement actually contains nothing inside it. So we want to make sure that we have everything formatted nicely so that it goes sequentially, the if statement, then what's inside the if statement. If it's true, like if this if statement is true, then I'll run the things inside the if statement. So yeah, just be really careful about indentations. You might have to like, once you press enter, you sometimes have to press like backspace in order to go back to the original indentation. And then so
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So wait, why is the elif there?
Yeah, so elif is different from if. So if actually runs every single time, like sequentially, it'll run every single time. But for elif, it'll run the if statement first. If it's true, then I'll just go directly to here. If it's false, then I'll go to the elif. But if it's true, it won't reach the elif statement. Yeah.
Okay, but what if you want to add a third one?
Then you can just keep doing elif. But if you want something that's always going to run, then you might want to use like an if statement every single time. But if you want it to be sequentially, so like if this is the first one, then we move on to the second one. Then if it's still not true, then we move on to the next one. Then that's
Also,
why we always elif.
Why would you put 2 equals there?
So actually the equals assignment operator, yeah, this is a comparator, and this is like assignment. So this means that we're putting this value into the x variable, whereas this is comparing the values between x and 0. And then it asks, yeah. And then you can also do comparators. So all of these are actually like comparators, less than, equals, equals. You can even do less than or equals to. And then you also have not equals to. So this one, we can just do not equals to, I'm just gonna do like 1. And then print x is not 1. So if in this case, then we can do something like 2. Yeah, x is not 1. So because it didn't qualify for this, it also didn't qualify for this. Then I moved to the last one and it was true. So then I'm printing out that.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, 2 small ones. So number 1, what is the 2 equal signs?
Yeah, I just explained that. The 2 equal signs
That's
is
not
like,
equal to. Okay.
oh yeah, this is
And
a
number-
not equal.
Yeah. And what does the new str bracket 10 colon 16 mean?
Oh, this is like a way to split up your array. So like we went over last week, each character in array has like an index to it. So this is taking the 10th index to the 16th index, and then taking those values and making a new string and then storing it back into this new string.
But like I think last week we talked about like if you have a certain amount of letters, it'll get a certain index, right? Where's the letters for this one?
So the letters are within this. This is a string. This is the literal that I was splicing up. So this is the string.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it'll get the 10 and 16th letter of that string.
It'll actually get the 10th through the 16th letter.
Oh, okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Saying in Java, like s dot substring 10 to the 16. So if you saw that yesterday, that's the same thing.
Excuse
Yeah,
me?
I'm gonna keep moving on. So
What does plus and equal sign do?
the plus and equal signs is actually the same thing as x equals x plus 2. So they're like just shorthand. But actually, I realize I'm gonna, in order to make this comparator easier, I'm just gonna take out that. But yeah, I just want to make sure that whatever we enter into the console is actually going to be executed throughout this code.
So it's x equals x plus 2.
Yeah. So yeah, you can also do things like less than or equals to 1. X is less than or equal to 1. And then I'm finally going to show you guys the else statement. And this is just going to represent above 1. Yeah, so in this case, if we do 1, then I'll say x is less than or equal to 1. And if we do anything above 1, then we're going to do, yeah, it's going to print out above 1. So else is, you can actually, in this if-else block, you can only have one else statement, and that's your final statement. And that means that like everything else, like if all of these are false, then it's just going to run whatever is inside this else block. If one of these is true, that means it's going to run these and not go to the else block. Yeah, so that was kind of confusing. Let me see if there's anything. You guys can also be chatting Shiba messages on too.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So is there a way to comment out the unnecessary portions of the code like all at once, or do we have to comment out each individual line?
No, you can do command / I think.
Yeah, so command / will work. You can also
Yes, I see. It works.
play with triple quotes. That's like another way to do multi-line commenting.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, if everyone's comfortable with doing these if-else blocks, then I think we can move on to something like arrays. So an array is a way to store multiple values into a single block of single line of code, I guess. Yeah. And so for this array, we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we can actually print that out.
Don't touch all those.
Everybody, please mute themselves. Sorry. And so this is an array. So we can store these 5 different integers in one single block of code. And then arrays are very versatile. You can use them to store a bunch of different things, from like if you're playing or if you're using an app like Facebook, probably like each one of your messages to your friends is stored in an array of strings or something like that. So they're very useful, and they're probably the things that you're going to be using most. And in order to get the individual values of arrays, each one of these, again, has an index, kind of like how the string was stored, like how each letter had an index. Each value in an array has an index as well. So if you did array 0, then you would get the first value of the array. So that would be 1. Yeah. And then you can also do the same thing with like the string splicing with the array splicing. You can get values from, let's say, 2 to 5. Yeah, and then that will get the last 3 values of the array. You can even do print the length of the array, and that should also give you how many values are in the array. So just to reiterate, even though these values are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the indexes associated with them start at 0. So this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the reason why we can do 2 through 5 is because we start at the 0, 1, 2 index, we get 3, and then we go 2, 3, 4, and actually the last index is not inclusive. So you don't get the 5th index, but that's like the boundary of it. So it's exclusive for the final, the end index, but it's inclusive for the start index.
Wait,
So,
what does len mean?
sorry?
What does len mean in the print len array?
Oh, that's how many values are in the array. So because we have 5 different values in this array.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And so one really useful tool, if we want to go through each value of the array and we don't want to go like print array 0, and then another statement, print array 1, and then keep going on and on, we can actually simplify this a lot by using a for loop. So you can use for I in array, and then we can print this I. And so I'll show you what it does first before I actually explain. So you see how every time I went through this for loop, it printed out a new value from the array. So basically what this does is actually it's creating a variable, and it's replacing that variable's value with every single value of the array. So first I will be stored with 1, then I will be stored with 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. And that's why every time the for loop is iterated through, then it'll print out a different value of the array. So it'll go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so that's really simple.
I have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So could you say like for I in array bracket 2, 5 to just print 2 to 5?
Yeah, I think that would it'll create like a subarray.
Like is there any way that you don't print all of them out?
Yeah, there are different ways to do that. This is one of the ways to just do it all the way through. And then, so this is the splicing of the array will just print out 3, 4, 5. And then I'll show you different ways to actually create a for loop, so you can, it'll be more variable. And then, so instead of, if you actually don't want the actual values of the array and you only want to use the indexes, you can also use something like, you can use range 0 through 5. Say you didn't actually create the array at first, you can even use for loops for when you don't have an array. Oops.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
But then, is there really a need for the for loop if you're just wanting to print out the 2 to 5 or the 0 to 5? Is there really a need to use the for loop?
No, you don't have to use a for loop. I
Okay.
mean, if you want, or sorry,
so
you don't use the.
Oh, I'm so sorry, but I had a distraction, so could you just repeat what a for loop is?
Yeah, so I think maybe some people are confused, but for loop basically.
My life's just.
For loop allows you to, in very simple terms, allows you to run whatever is inside the for loop multiple times. So if I wanted to do print I multiple times, then I would do this. If I wanted to do something like x equals 1, and then every single time we add 1 to it, then it should add 1 to it. Oh, whoops, sorry. And then print x.
So when you're saying that for I in range 0 to 5, you're basically saying that you only pick the numbers within the range of 0 to 5?
Yes. So in this case, it'll be from 0 all the way, including 4.
So if you basically, if you basically ask it to print out a number that is like beyond that range, then it won't do it basically?
So you can still like print out a value that's way above it, but the point of the for loop is to know how many times it's being executed. So in this case, we want this block of code to be executed 5 different times. Well, actually, wait. Yeah, 5 different times. And then, so that's how this range allows us to demonstrate to the code how many times we want to do it. If you want to do it like 100 times, then you can also do it for 100 times. Yeah. And then
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when I do the for I in range 0 to 5, and then I do the colon, then I do print I, it only gives me like 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Is that like what it's supposed to do, or?
Yeah. So in this case, I was just doing 0, 1, 2. Yeah, this would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it'll be starting from. It'll start from 0, I believe, or actually.
Yeah, so for range, the first parameter that you have, always if you specify it as 0, you can specify it for whatever you want. So it can start at 2 or it can start at 3, but the default will be 0. So even if she doesn't include that 0 in the range, so if you remove the 0 comma, then it will go from range starting from 0 all the way up until 5, but it won't include 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just remember, whenever we have any kind of range, even if it's like a substring or like a subarray, or even like these kinds of ranges, whatever is the first value will be included, and the end index will be 1 less. So it won't include 5, but it'll do 1 less than 5. So this will be 1 through 4. Yeah. And then, let's see. You can also create arrays not only with integers, but you can also do it with words. So I'm going to do an array of, I guess I'll change the name of it. Words. I'm just going to put some random animal names. And so arrays can also store strings, and then you can print these out. So yeah. And if you want, I guess you could modify each one of them as well, and you can do different ranges with them. Yep. And I think if you want, you can also.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Since you define words above, why would you write for word in words?
Yeah. So this words corresponds to the actual array, and this word is actually each individual value. So it'll be, first off, it'll be cat, and it'll store word as cat. And so that's in our first iteration of the loop. In the second iteration of the loop, it'll be replaced with dog, and then it'll be replaced with bird. So word will actually, the value in word will change. You can actually name this whatever you want, honestly. It can be like X or hello, as long as you're consistent. But just know that this value will be interchanged with every single value of the array at every single different iteration of the loop. Yeah.
Excuse me, just one quick thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's printing all of them at the same time. It's like it's changing the value, but like you can see all 3 of the words at the same time. Is that natural?
So actually, it's not immediate. Like if you do like super long for loops, then it won't be like an immediate. It'll actually like have to go through each iteration every single time. It'll essentially be the same thing as saying print words of 0, print words of 1, and then print words of 2. But the for loop just makes it an easier way to do it. But essentially those two things are doing the same thing. So it's not like it's immediately like in parallel changing the value of hello. I don't think that's quite possible. Yeah. And so something you can also do is use something like sum in range 4, and this should actually give you the sum of the values of range between 0 and 4. So this should be 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3. That's just another tool you can use when you're dealing with arrays. And yeah, you can also put, if you want to use our array that we created earlier, you can replace this with actually. Right.
Wait, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So, where does the hello come from? You say for hello in words. Is it already a defined variable?
No. So actually, hello is just an arbitrary like label that a variable that we define in our for loop. So sorry, there's someone else talking. So essentially in our for loop, we are actually defining this variable and initializing it with every single value of the array and like replacing it with every value. So hello is like arbitrary. You can even.
What does that mean?
Arbitrary means like it's just random. Like it doesn't really matter.
Okay, so you haven't defined hello yet, but it will be a part of the array.
It's not part
of that. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So kind of think of that word. So for in this case, it's dog. So kind of think of that as just a temporary variable that you can use to access each element in the array or list of words. So dog, each time you go through that for loop, it'll be cat. Dog represents cat, and the next time it'll represent dog, and the time after that will represent bird. So it's just a temporary variable that you use.
We'll be accessing. So now for hello, we'll be accessing the whole words array.
Yeah. And then hello would just represent the first one the first time you execute it. And then the second time it will be the second word in the array.
That's like why I initially called it word, because it made the most sense, because I wanted to define it as like the original word. But yeah, it doesn't really matter what you use as long as you know that that's the access point for the array. And then, so if everyone's okay with that, we can also do something like print range of 4, and this should actually create a list of, yeah, so this is like an easier way to create a list if you don't want to actually write out all the different values. You can do like 100, and this will create an array that you can just print out to the console. Yeah. So this is like a shorthand for doing like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and yeah, you can get a larger range from that. I'm pretty sure you can also do like 1 through 100, and it'll start from 1, and you can do whatever range you need for like the numbers that you want.
Can you do a range where you like skip certain numbers, like only even or only odd? Like a list of that?
Yeah, I think, hold on. I forget the actual range for even numbers. I think there's like a
range function, you can also include like a third number and as a comma.
Oh, right.
Step. So if you start at like 0, for example, you can step by 2 if you put as a third parameter in that function.
Sorry, I forgot that. Yeah, and this will get you every other value.
Okay, thanks.
This is odd, and then you can start from like 0 to the evens.
Oh wait, just to make sure, I'm
Yeah.
running it in a compiler, and I think the last range, is it supposed to like shorten it so it doesn't just list all the numbers in a column? So like instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all in one column, it's making it through rows, correct?
Wait, are you doing it like in a for loop, or is that what you're?
No, I'm talking about the list range 1, 102.
Oh, that's actually just creating an array of them. It's not doing list like columns or
How come
rows.
it's not? How come if it's an array, how come it's not listing all the numbers from top to bottom, just like straight?
Because that's how arrays actually are typically listed. Like this is actually when I was printing it out separately. But how the actual array works, like if you did this one, it would also print straight out
Oh, got it. Thank you.
the array. Yeah. So this is because the print statement goes into a new line every single iteration of the for loop. Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone have more questions about these? You can also do like however many you want to index by. I'll only do like every 5 values. We'll just do like plus equals 5 every single time. I'll give you the range.
Yeah. Excuse me?
Yes.
Can you review at the end?
Yes, we're going to review at the end.
Okay.
Okay, if everyone's comfortable with that, I think we can move on to a little bit more complicated code. So this code is going to be able to determine if n is a prime number. And so the way that we be able to do like these mathematical computations is by first, we're going to just input a value. We're going to ask the console, like input a number, similar to what we did in the beginning. And for this, I want to loop through all the different possible divisors of n, because a prime number means that like it's not divisible by any other number. So we want to do in range 2, because that's like every number is divisible by 1 and it doesn't really count. So it's from 2 to n. And then if n, and then this is bringing back something we learned in the past class, modulus of x. So does everyone remember what modulo is?
Correct. It takes the remainder after the division is done.
Exactly. So if this is true, that means that n is actually divisible by x, which means it's not a prime number. So in this case, we can print out that n, yeah, I'm just gonna do equals, and then x times, and then, oh, actually, n divided by x. So in this case, we're just printing out the value of n, which is what we originally started with, and then, whoops, I missed this, x, which is the value that we found between 2 to n. So we're going through every single possible divisor of it and seeing if it's divisible to n. So like if n is divisible by x, then it should be, the remainder should be 0, right? And then in that case, then we're going to be printing out n is equal to one of the divisors and then by the other divisor. So like if it was 10, then it'll start at 2. If n is 10, then it'll start at 2, and then it'll just go 2 is, and 10 is equal to 2 times 5. And then I'll print that out. And then in that case, we actually want to break out of the for loop because we already found out that n is not a prime number. And in that case, we don't want to go through all the other values in this range to keep checking to see if it's a prime number because we already know it's divisible by that. So we use this command called break to break out of the for loop earlier. And this will help like save memory. Sometimes you want to use it in like longer pieces of code in order to just like save time if you after a certain point know that you don't need to run the code anymore. And so if every single time that this is ran and is still not discovered as divisible at any other number, then we can determine that n is in fact a prime number. So I'm just gonna, well actually, first clear this off. But yeah, there's some like corner cases such as one that I didn't handle, but in this case, I'm just gonna go Python. Yeah, so I'm just gonna try like 7. Oh, whoops. I did not do 59. Oh, right, this is, yeah. So actually, I'm gonna teach you guys another shorthand for this because I don't want to have to cast it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I want to make sure that this is actually also the same shorthand, so can do, in order for you not to have to cast it, and then you can actually create a literal out of it, you can just do this. Otherwise, you can actually do like int around this, but since we have a number of values, I figured this is probably a good time to bring up this is possible.
Wait, why do you change all the quotations to single quotes?
I'm pretty sure it'll work without the single quotes too as well. Yeah, it should work without a single quotes as well. You can actually do it either way. It was just easier for me to type out. Yeah, single quotes and double quotes, they're not too big a difference. Usually single quotes are defined for chars. In this case, I used it for a string, and that was fine too. So this
and instead of pluses, you're using commas?
Yeah, instead of the plus, I'm using commas.
Oh, okay.
Isn't it just easier to do a for else loop because you're reprinting the I am a prime or x or n is a prime number over and over?
Oh, I think that was, yeah, wait, hold on. I think that
And you could just
that was
do
not,
like
that was like a bug in my code originally, but I think now it should only print out. Oh. Yeah, actually, you're probably supposed to break out of this as well.
Wait, but then still it wouldn't work because if condition isn't matched on the first one, it would just go to the else right away.
Oh, that's what you guys are meaning. Oh, okay.
So isn't it just a for else loop?
Yeah. I think.
So you can just include the print statement outside the for loop so it's not indented in and remove the else inside the statement.
Yeah.
So for else loops aren't really used in Python. So this would be like a better way to do it instead of a for else loop.
Okay, but then wouldn't it still always print the print statement?
No, because it's outside the for loop now, so it's only going to print it once the for loop is done executing.
Yeah, but then by that logic, it'll print that n is
Oh, you mean
equal
like
to something or something, but then it'll still say that n is a prime number.
And you can just put it at the if statement. You can put it like indented to the if statement.
I was just gonna define a Boolean like
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
equals false. So then we want to do. I can reset this to true to define that this. Oh, actually, it's capitalized in Python, but this will actually help us determine if it was true or false. And then in the end, we can, if temp is still false, then we can say that it's not been set to true, and that means that it's not been printed out before. Yeah. So something like 13. Yeah. That should work better than. My bad for not catching that.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Where have you defined temp in this?
So I defined it outside the for loop, and this is some like common practice where you can have Booleans outside of your for loop and reset them conditionally, and then in the end you can check to see if that's still the case.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So I ran my code and it input a number, and so I put in 7, and it came out as 7 as a prime number, but it wrote that 5 times.
Oh yeah, that was the bug that we just caught. So
Originally
I had it as an else statement, but then I realized that every single time it's not. Someone pointed out that every single time it's not reached this condition, that I'll go directly to the else statement, and that's actually not what we want to do. Yeah, we don't want to print it out multiple times, so we have this Boolean temp value, and we conditionally set it to true only if we know it's a prime number. If we know it's not a prime number and it has a divisor, and then at the end, if we find out that after going through this entire loop and going through all the possibilities that it's still this is still false, that means that it hasn't been reset to true and it hasn't been met this condition at any point in time, then we can actually print out at the end that it is a prime number.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so yeah, these commas are also a replacement for the plus equals.
Wait, why do you set a variable called temp again?
So temp is a Boolean variable. Honestly, it would be probably better to rename it like is prime or something like that, or is not prime in this case. But it essentially just helps us keep track of whether it is a prime or not in the code. So initially, we're going to just assume that it's not a prime, or it is a prime number. And then we're going to set it to true if we find a divisor for it. And then at the end, in order to print out this final print statement without having, like, conditionally, only if, like, after going through this entire for loop, that we realize that it still has no divisor, then we print it out. So this helps us keep track of, like, the conditions that this needs to meet as a prime number. Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So when I run the code with the prime number, it says that it is a prime number, but when I run it and I put in a number that's not a prime number, it'll give me an error.
So like 4, I think it should be able to print out this. Maybe check to see that you're defining this print statement okay, like, because sometimes you might miss, like, if you're using the concatenation, then you might miss like a plus or something like that, or that this is not it's not a string value, so it can't be printed out, or can't be concatenated with it. So like, yeah. Oh wait, this is not interesting.
Yeah, it gives me that same error when I put in something that's not a prime number.
So that's like the problem with being n is actually an integer, so that's why I was using the shorthand where you can just do n comma is a prime number. And that will actually allow this to be an integer and still be concatenated with this string.
Yeah, so what I have is like for x in range 2 comma n colon if n percentage x equals 0 colon print brackets n plus quotation marks equals end quote plus x plus quote times end quote plus n divided by x.
I think the way that you should be like having what's it called? You should be probably using like dot format or something to have a variable be able to be inserted into the print statement. But I was just saying that this is probably easier for this case, a shorthand.
Oh, I got it to work.
Okay, cool.
I just changed the pluses to commas and it worked.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The shorthand is nice to be able to print different types within the same line.
Wait,
yeah.
For me, for n is a prime number, it's still printing 3 times.
Make sure you are setting a conditional and resetting it here, and then making sure that this if statement is actually outside of the for loop, meaning that it lines up with the for statement, and that means that it's not including it inside the actual for loop, because everything indented into this is part of the for loop, so it'll run every single time. So if this was indented, then it'll probably print out multiple times, and we don't necessarily want that. But if we are able to move that out of the for loop, then you can print it only once.
Yeah, it got to work now.
Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna quickly go over what we went over today. So this was like a little review of last week's lesson. Then we went over some if-else statements, and actually I can show you a few more conditionals, but these are pretty like straightforward in terms of mathematical symbols. Yeah. So in this case, I'm just gonna run this. Please enter an integer, and I'll do like 5. Oh, yeah. This print statement is not true, but it went into the if statement. Yeah, I would have to change it to is greater than or equal to 1. That is what we did next.
For the elif, could I enter a string and then make it work? And if so, how could I do that?
So if you do strings, you have to, actually I think in Python, you can actually do equals equals. So I'm gonna test it out right now. String, if s equals string, then return. So I think it should, because like in Java, you typically have to do dot equals, but in Python, you can actually compare strings with equals equals as well. And actually an interesting thing about this, like if you do A, B, C, or A, and you compare it to B, then you can do like A is not B, but, oh, yeah, so actually A is not B, so it won't print out anything. But if you do that, then A is not B. And then it actually, the way you think about alphabetically, you can also do like less than or equal to. So this should be like A is less than B. And so since A is like first in the alphabet, and then B is second, then A is technically has like a less, alphabetically less than B. And so that's a
Could I input the value and then make it do the if and elif?
Yeah, so that's what we
could I put input or int and then type something in for whatever statement, and then could it have?
Yeah, so we can also do this with like our input. So yeah, our input is less than in this case. And then you can also test to see if you view BA and then this should be, it'll still be less than B because there's this extra character counts as more than banan. So yeah, basically whatever is first in the dictionary, you would think about it in that way, alphabetically or whatever you think about it, will appear first, and so it'll be less than. And if you do greater than, then you can do something like, and then this will still
Thank you.
Cat is greater than, because C is further in the alphabet. Yeah. So that's how you can compare strings as well. And then we also did a brief overview of arrays. You can define arrays as a way to store multiple values. And in this case, we're storing 5 different integers. And then you can print that out as an array. Arrays are really useful in code. Typically, everything is stored in an array if you have multiple values or multiple versions of something, such as like a comment on like a post that should be stored in an array. There's many different uses for arrays, or like cards in a card game is probably stored in an array as well. So this is why it's like one of the most fundamentally important things. And then you can also use like these length to define how many values are in an array. And then next we went over for loops, which are essentially a ways to loop through an array. So in this case, we can go through an array, print it out. Yeah, and so basically every single, the lines inside the for loop, which are the indented lines, those will be executed multiple times, or however many times the array, this range is told. So because our range is defined by our array, I will be assigned to a different value every single time, and then it'll print it out. And so the same thing with this range thing.
No.
This one will actually add 1 every single time to the original value of x. And since this is only between 1 and 4, it will only execute 4 times. And then we also have our for loop for our strings that are pretty similarly. Yeah. So we can also have an array of strings and then loop through them with this for in range. And then I also mentioned that it's essentially the same thing as printing out these lines individually, but I didn't comment that out. Yeah, but it essentially makes it easier for us to go through the entire array. And then there's some shorthands such as sum for an array. as well as creating a list with a range and then printing it out. Yep. And then if we don't, you can also do every time it's increments by 1. So we'll go through 1 through 100, but only increment by 1 every time. But we can also change this value to like 10, and it'll only do every 10 values. Yep.
Excuse me, I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
If you're only wanting to increment it by 1, then it's not necessary to put the third range in, correct?
Yes.
All right.
I just wanted to show you that you can if you want to. But yeah, it's perfectly valid to do without the third value as well. It'll just do every single value in between the 2 indexes. And yes, this code will be uploaded to the GitHub with also the homework answers. And so we finally, sorry we're going a little bit over time, but we made a prime number script. And so it takes in a number, such as like 17, and it'll spit out that it is a prime number because it goes through every single possible divisor of that number. And then if it's ever, the modulo is ever equal to 0, which means that when it's divided by that divisor, it has no remainder. That means it's divisible. And then we set our temp value, which we originally set it as false because we wanted to assume that everything was a prime number, because that's, yeah. And then if it happens to have a divisor, then we set it to true. And then finally, if it's still false in the end, then we say it's a prime number and it doesn't have any divisors. Could you recommend a good starting book? Sorry, I didn't see the chat earlier. I couldn't find on my screen. So actually the Python documentation, sorry, I think you can just look up documentation. This should have a lot of the things that you need in order to like understand like the library reference, things like Boolean operators. So I can chat this right now. If you want something like easier to read in like Python tutorials, I think Geeks for Geeks has something like that. But yeah, this will contain like basically every command that is available on Python. And if we go through like the first few, we didn't do and or in this yet, but there's some operations that we went over today. Is also a valid operation. Yeah. And Stack Overflow has a bunch of things too as well. Good point. So yeah, if you ever have any like bugs that show up in your console, like for example, if you miss an indent like this, and it says indentation error, you can always copy and paste this onto your browser and then go to like the first Stack Overflow post. And then someone probably answered like, you have an indentation error. It's probably by mixing up your tabs or spaces. And then so you can go back and look back on where you might have missed your tabs or spaces. And yeah, so class is already ended. I'm just answering a few questions as they come up. Feel free to leave whenever. And yeah, I will upload this code right after this class.
Why did you get a bug when you were using plus signs and the double quotes, but then when you changed it, you didn't have that bug anymore?
The reason why the plus signs and the double quotes didn't work was because I think we casted it as an int value. So ints can't be concatenated with strings. So I guess if I put 17, yeah, so this n is a int value and this is a string, so they can't be added together. But this shorthand actually takes in any different types, and it splits it up either as a string literal, so it'll take this one as a string literal, or it'll change like the variable you have into a string. So that's why I was using the shorthand.
So would it just be like good practice to use the shorthand stuff, or?
You can also do this to like cast it back to a string.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went over like a couple of different ways to print. So the comma is like a different way. There's no like proper way to do it. It's whatever is like preferable to you.
There's also like dot format, something like that. Yeah. Don't know off the top of my head, but I think we went over that in the first class. But yeah, I think the easiest way is either those two. When you said you didn't do the prime calculator for one, you just print. Oh yeah, for sure. You can definitely handle like the corner cases. If n equals 1 or n equals 2. I think 2 is not considered our prime number. If this is a special number. And that should handle it initially. Oh, but we don't want it to be, yeah. Yeah, we don't want this to run. So we could set like another, or like pass it at the end of the code. Yeah. If I do not prime number program. So yeah, if you guys want me to go over the program again, I can explain it. Sure. Okay. Basically, we're looping through all the divisors that are possible between 2, which is like where you start counting like the divisors of a prime number, to all the way to n. And then we're checking to see if that's divisible by any value. And then if that's true, then we're going to set this temporary Boolean as true and then break out of the code. So we're just going to immediately get out of this for loop because we already know that it's divisible by a divisor. And so yeah, the first value that's going to go into this is 2. And I guess if it's a multiple of 2, it'll immediately break out of this after running it once. And then it'll check to see if temp is false. And since we already set temp to true here, that we know that it's not false, and then we won't print this out. So it might be kind of confusing, but if you actually go in there and like reset, you have like a variable of x and write down every single value possible and match it to n, then yeah, it should kind of make sense. Yes. So yeah, some syntax there. But yeah, it looks like. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the colon is a way to start a for loop or a if statement. So you want those at the end. Okay, yeah. If any, the homework will be posted later. And if anyone else has questions, you guys can Slack us. I think we're going to start this meeting now. Share.